afternoon. It's 1:03 and the May 25th meeting of the Narberth Infrastructure Committee is called to order. We have Ira Winston on Zoom remotely, and Rob is here in the room. So first item of business to approve the minutes for April 25th. April 25th, 2022, I think it was. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. All right, let's move along to the information items for discussion. The first item is the sidewalk inspection program. We have a memo from the manager as well as one from our code enforcement officer in the packet. Would you like to address that?
Sure, thank you. So once council had an opportunity to pass the updated sidewalk regulations, I had an opportunity to notify our public works manager as well as our code enforcement officer, and they started some dialogue about what implementation of a sidewalk inspection program would actually look like. Once they really started kind of thinking through that exercise, they realized they started by looking at the pass-fail rate of UNO sidewalk inspections in the borough and found that those were actually 50%, which I think on one hand speaks to the need for a sidewalk inspection program, but on the other hand, I think speaks to a scope of work that I don't think any of us intended when we created this program. So based on the memo from our code enforcement officer and some further dialogue with our public works manager, a snippet of which I included in my memo, I don't think it's going to be feasible for us to do the entire borough this year and still meet everything else we need to get done. So the proposal that I actually do give credit where it's due, that both our public works manager and our council president independently came up with, was that we do a phased trial sort of run, limit the scope of the inspections for the moment, and also by doing a smaller area would make sure that the implementation and the rollout is good on it. So the suggested area in particular is our 5A zoning district, the area where our businesses are on Haverford Ave and portions of Narberth Ave. And I think if we were just to start with that and see how it goes, I think that could work out a lot better than trying to do it all at once. It was also brought to my attention that the borough, I guess 20 years ago or so, was the actual installer of those sidewalks. And there was some concern about, I heard a concern about what would the reaction of people be if the borough is now telling them to fix sidewalk that the borough had put in, or maybe I misunderstood that concern.
No, that's not. I think that you addressed that.
Okay, all right, yeah. So I think my memo addresses, that
that's a concern. I mean,
so I just wanted to see if you all had any further thoughts on, on this approach, any suggested other items for us to consider before we start in this direction. I see Ira has his hand raised as well.
So in particular on the Haverford Avenue, I know that there's a sidewalk pattern that's used there, right? Like the smaller blocks, right? So, but is there some requirement that if the property owner replaced the sidewalk in front of their property rather than the borough doing it, that they would have to keep it to that pattern?
We did require that. The new developments going on, we've required them to replace it with that matching pattern for the whole downtown.
Okay, well, I guess that answers my question. It's just that it probably would be good to remind anybody with a violation that that's how it works, because I'm not sure that everybody agreed with that pattern, so they might take it into their own hands. Like if I'm paying, I'm doing it the way I want to do it. So.
Yeah.
And I think I'll double check the language in the ordinance that we did, but I think the ordinance that council recently passed has some language of, sidewalk repair has to be kind of similar to what was there before. So thanks for asking about that, Ira.
So I just wanted to ask Samantha, you and Jeff, about the inspection piece. Is that something that the Public Works crew can handle, or is that going to Kevin?
So the way we've talked about working, and I'm probably going to defer to Jeff in just a minute here, and my understanding of how it's going to work, and Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that Kevin would take a few hours with the Public Works team so that we have sort of a standardized approach to how we're doing the inspection. And I think the new ordinance will help with that a lot as well, because it takes a lot of the subjectivity out of the process. And then once they've all spent a few hours with Kevin to ensure everyone has the same standards for inspection, then members of Public Works would, on their own, without Kevin, would handle the inspection. Is that?
Yep, that's accurate.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
Now, the big piece for Kevin, just to follow up on that point, is not going to be the inspections per se. It's going to be when Public Works identifies, areas where they fail inspection, where Kevin is really then going to have to get involved with issuing violation letters, following up to make sure the work is done. Unfortunately, if necessary, issuing citations and dealing with the court and all that.
yeah, I mean, I think Kevin indicated that they would require 2 on-site inspections for each sidewalk as it was being repaired. One before they pour it, one for the formwork, and then one after.
Right.
So that is quite significant, and I think that's where a lot of the time and expense of this budget is, and you need to do that. I guess there's no way around it. So, yeah.
Well, but you're saying that that's the part that Jeff and his crew can do, right? It's only if there's a violation that Kevin comes in?
No, they would be doing the initial. They would be doing the initial marking of whether things pass or fail, and then if things fail, Kevin would then have to do the inspections of when pre-pour and post-pour.
Okay, so Kevin has to be there for every replacement.
Or Yerke, somebody from Yerke.
Yeah, not necessarily Kevin, but exactly Kevin or
the
Aisha or something.
formwork, and then they have to go back to the
Okay.
after.
So you can identify all the problem areas?
Yep.
And then I see, okay,
So,
I got it.
Yeah, I have one additional question. It's more of a point of information. How does the code, the new code, read on areas where there are sort of tree roots involved? Is there any to discuss that issue? Because a lot of times this damage comes from tree roots pushing up the tile, and there are steps you can take that might kill the tree. There are some other approaches where you wind up sort of like grinding the sidewalk so that like it's smooth, but maybe like at a different elevation. So I'm just curious if that issue is addressed, since I apologize for not having read it.
Yeah, so the ordinance itself doesn't necessarily speak to specific situations. It just speaks to what condition the sidewalk needs to be in and what sort of amount of cracks or height disparities are tolerated. There is some language in there about not planting things, that then, in terms of tree branches that then grow out into the sidewalk. I don't think it explicitly addresses tree roots, and something that the Public Works Manager and I've had some chats about is, as we try to support our shade tree commission and expand the number of shade trees in the borough, is really making sure that people are planting the right trees to do our best to head off these issues in the future.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ira, because I do recall there was an issue with, I think it was on the south side. Do you remember this? There was some work being done, and I remember members of our Shade Tree Commission were very upset.
Actually,
There were people who were upset about the way that the sidewalk was being done, and then they were saying that this could have been done in a way that didn't disturb the tree roots, and I don't remember the details.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember this?
I don't, but I was just looking in this, the adopted ordinance, and there actually is a section talking
Oh, thank
about
you.
trees.
Okay.
So as remediation shall avoid unnecessary damage or injury to trees and shrubs, you have to replace things that are destroyed or damaged. So it does seem to address So
Yeah.
certain step
Well,
trees.
this is a.
Okay, good, thank you.
Michelle, part of what you may be referring to is there was a request for a curbing waiver at one point by Shade Tree. You know, if there's a tree that could be saved, Shade Tree would like to see that happen, rather than insist that a curb be put in place. So I think
I think that's not really a decision I think that's a policy decision that
right.
I don't know if it's appropriate for staff to make that call. I mean, of course, we would have our own opinions probably,
Right.
given on a case-by-case basis, whether it makes more sense to fix the sidewalk or save the trees.
Did they provide us with like a draft ordinance of some form? Is that something we should resuscitate before, we should look at as a policy matter before rolling? I mean, we're not rolling this out for a while, but before we get there.
I think it's really specific to the curbs and not the sidewalks.
Okay.
Is my
Yeah.
memory.
All right.
So
That sounds right.
I think we could go ahead with this, and I could talk to Shade Tree if you like about
Would
the
you?
curbs.
Yeah, let's just see what they think. If there's any best practice that we should consider adopting, have them look at that section and see if there's anything that we should do differently.
Well, Rob,
Consider
if
it,
you're
so.
talking to them, Rob, you might ask them how they feel about this issue about kind of letting the sidewalk slope up a little bit, to deal with the branch. Because I know a number of my neighbors who are worried about their trees have taken that approach rather than replacing the sidewalk. It's not to save money. It's just to protect, to save the tree.
Right, okay, yeah,
Okay, thanks, Rob.
yeah.
So, anybody else have comments or questions about this first step in 5A? Is this something that we will then take to council and have?
No, I was planning on us just kind of,
Okay,
just sort of doing it.
okay. All right, should we move on? All right, so I think that's, if that's where we want to start off with, let's see how it goes, and we'll follow up as we get more information from the rollout. Hanson Court streetlight pillars. There is a memo. Would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So this is an issue that predates my time in the borough, and Borough Council agreed in October 2020, I believe it was, for the borough to take responsibility for these pillars. At the last infrastructure meeting where this was seriously discussed, I think it was December 2021 maybe, where we agreed to send letters to the residents of Hanson Court, letting them know what the borough was thinking about, getting their feedback, and seeing if anyone there would be interested in helping financially contribute to it. The letter that infrastructure saw, which went out to those folks, called for replacing the pillars with more, standard street lights. The borough got a very mixed reaction to that. So, what I decided to do before talking to this committee again about it was to actually see the price difference between the two approaches, because my biggest hang up with just repairing them was I wasn't sure what the cost of that would be compared to the cost of replacing them, and I wasn't sure what the life expectancy of the two approaches would be. So I was finally able to get a quote from a reputable mason to do repair work, as well as a reputable electrician to do the replacement work. And the price to do the repair work is a little over $7,000. And this would involve, the contractor explained to me, you can't just patch this material. He would have to basically, take it all off and replace the material that's there to fix it. And that's why the cost to do that is what it is. And then the other possibility is if we have the electrician remove the post and set the electric up for, more standard streetlights to go in, that was a little over $8,000. However, I found out today, I mentioned in my memo there would be an additional cost to then actually put the lights in, and I found out today from our streetlight consultant that we could reasonably estimate that cost around $4,800 to then put the lights in. So given that we're looking at a little over 7,000 to repair them, and we're looking at 8 plus, we'll say, 5, about 13,000 to replace them. And given the resident feedback we got in that everyone generally seemed fine with repairing them, whereas there was more mixed reaction to replacing them. That's why at this point I think we should go with the repair option. I welcome the borough engineer and public works manager's thoughts on this. With my own amateur attempt at figuring out a life expectancy of the two approaches, seemed like they were similar, relative to the cost. It seemed like it would be similar life expectancy, and so the better value would still, even factoring that in, would be to do the repair work.
I would say, when I looked at them, they're masonry structures. So if you're going to have a mason come in, tear down the loose parts, or repoint it, rebrick it, and stucco it, it's going to last as long as a masonry structure would. So you'd probably get a substantial lifetime out of it at that point.
I'm on board with that. Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the best route.
I mean, it is
Yeah.
what it is. I mean, they won't last as long as the LED, streetlights will, and they won't, but they'll last long enough. I mean, it probably makes sense. I think the one thing I feel really like we need to say is, I think the borough wanted to take responsibility because they are street lights, and therefore there's a safety feature. I don't think it was ever established who installed them or who really owns them or is responsible for them. I think it's fine, although at this point, the lights work, right? Or
Yeah.
the existing lights work.
Right.
So it's, like, I'm okay with this because here we are. I wouldn't want this to be a precedent for fixing masonry features of private developments, because I actually think like they look like they're decorative and they're the same kind of masonry that's on the wall a couple yards away that sort of goes all around, the
Right.
Montgomery side of Hanson Court. I think a developer put those in when they divided that out and created those homes back there. I just think it needs to be said expressly, the borough is not responsible for those walls. If somebody drives into one of those light posts after we do this work, are we responsible to fix it? What are we actually assuming responsibility for?
Well, even before embarking on this, that's, something I looked into. And again, watching that recording at council, and if I had worked here at the time, I certainly would have said almost word for word what you just said. No disrespect to anyone involved at the time. But given that I didn't, I wasn't here to say all that. And my unfortunate take on the council meeting from October 2020 is council basically kind of, the way they worded and said things, wrote a blank check of sorts, not for the walls, but for these pillars. And I think, whether I personally like it or not, I think Borough Council committed the borough to being responsible for these pillars.
Yeah. Sorry.
Can I ask one question? What is the technology of the current lights? I take it they're not LEDs.
They are not at the moment, but it wouldn't be. Another thing I had a sidebar conversation with the LED consultant about is converting them to LED would be, if you're keeping the existing structure, converting the lights themselves to LED would be a nominal cost and project. So we would definitely do that as well.
Oh, so that is planned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then works for me. Then.
I guess I would say, if someone drove into them, our liability insurance would cover it. But I do, but I don't look forward to, whether it's, whether it's 20, 30 years from now or however long it is, I don't look forward to the borough having this conversation again, but, that's the situation we have.
Yes, we all apologize in advance to people who are sitting here in 30 years. Having to try and figure out, what did they do exactly? We don't know. Okay.
My name be me, Eric and Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for handling this. It would, I prefer to see us put in the same LED lights we have everywhere else, but I can see that that's not really good value right now. So Anybody else? Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so potential action items for Borough Council. We have a very descriptive, and thank you very much for your very clear memo. Jeff, I'm sorry, probably not talking about enough. On Borough's snow operations and equipment improvements that could make snow removal more efficient in Borough. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Sure.
Thank you.
When I first typed this up, the first two options on there, the plow attachments for the skid steer are just two of the most popular ones that are out there. I would lean more towards the cage plow, which is also the cheaper of the two. At any time that I look at investing in equipment, especially for that type of water account for ice and all that stuff, the more pieces that move, the more hydraulic lines and everything else, it just kind of frightens me that, there's a higher chance of something happening, which will put that equipment out of operation. The cage plow is a very simple, effective attachment for it. So that's the one I think that Public Works would prefer and would help the town the most.
Okay.
And then in kind of in tandem here with the spreader for the truck, is being priced into the truck build that we requested a quote for as well.
Right.
And then I think you have a couple of pieces of follow-up information on the truck request. About the EAC and Lower Marion.
In regards to their trucks or their...
Well, I remember, I think maybe Rob, I heard from you that speaking with Jesse Lytle, the chair of our EAC, that he seemed on board with the idea that there weren't realistic alternate options for the sort of truck that Public Works needs.
Right.
And so that we can move forward with this, but separately, the EAC is going to want to figure out a contribution to carbon offsets elsewhere in the borough via the Green Fund to make up for the price per ton of carbon that this vehicle would put out. And Jeff, I think what you had told me you had done is you had spoken with folks over in Lower Marion Township about how they plan to use the electric truck that they got for Public Works, and it wasn't really for this sort of usage.
It was in no way, shape, or form for actual physical work. It's more an inspector's truck.
Okay.
To drive around. They might pick up some trash here and there.
Right.
They're not planning on putting a piece of equipment in the back and running out, to do sidewalks or cut grass or anything. So it's just going to be basically a transport vehicle for, for tier their management.
I would imagine pushing snow uses a lot of horsepower.
And also reliability is a concern for snow plowing.
Yeah, no, we just don't have a good option yet on the market. So Jesse confirmed that, and yeah, so he thought it, just as you said, let's go ahead and then figure out the contribution.
So what I'd like to bring to Borough Council at the June business meeting is, if we can figure this out in time, is a cost proposal for the truck and any of the snow plowing equipment that Jeff thinks we need. A estimated cost of a contribution to the Green Fund. Maybe me and Rob and Jesse could get together and figure that out, and then ask for a budget adjustment from Borough Council to cover the cost of all that for this year, because it was originally in our capital plan for 2023.
I understand that you had consulted with the EAC about the sidewalk firm and found that there really isn't an alternative to gas powered one.
Not for the scale that we would get here, especially if we do get the piece of land over on Elmwood, and that's just going to add another length of sidewalk to us. That
I mean, that's fine with me. I think that you're gonna have the equipment.
Yeah, no,
to do the job, so nothing here seems unreasonable.
Yeah,
Just no gold-plated interiors.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, but I think our department is certainly willing, to adjust where we can. If you look at what we did with all of our equipment.
Yeah, I appreciate
parts,
that.
So where we can, we're more than happy, to switch, and go that route, but there's this, until the tech is there's just certain aspects that we can't compromise on.
Right.
And I think something else just for the public's edification in this committee is that I believe Public Works is looking into is, at one point Public Works had 4 trucks and now they have 3. And instead of getting a 4th truck, Public Works has been looking into getting an all-electric Gator style vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'll be a significant carbon reduction that we can quantify through our ICLEI software.
True, that's a great point.
For the borough, yeah, so that's great.
Yeah, because, once we have that, our Gator, and then our entire landscape park maintenance operation will be 100%. We can use that on the infield for the work, we can use that for planting flowers, hitting the flowers up down. So once that's in, that's our last key piece, to really finalize that side of our operations to be 100% EV.
That's great.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah.
Be nice to see a photo of you with the equipment on the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
It's a nice brag. That's good, thank you. Okay, anything else on this item? Ira, anybody? Okay. The next item on our agenda is Parks and Rec duties update. And I don't really know that we can have a discussion. Certainly we can't give anything to council for an action item. One thing that I had asked Parks and Rec to do at their last meeting was to consider what we used to call the charge, for Parks and Rec duties, to sort of consider what, to get some feedback from them in addition to whatever we came up with so we could put the two together and come up with something for council. We don't have that from them, so we can only sort of do what we can do on our side now. And I would like to open it up just a discussion if there's anything that anybody hasn't thought about that they think would make for a good project for Parks and Recreation to take on this coming year that could help us move some of our goals forward. I'd love to hear about that. Some things that have been suggested to me, I'll throw out on the table. Well, there are a number of items about the skate park, but I think that ship has sailed. So that was 1, 2, and 3. Then we had something about researching and proposing a strategy for how Narberth could renegotiate with Lower Merion Township pool and camp prices for Narberth residents. And the question was how do other boroughs that share functions that are sort of geographically within larger townships handle this, and are they getting better deals for their residents? I don't know, that seems more like an office thing, but it had been suggested by another council member that could be something that would be appropriate to ask.
Yeah.
There was also reviewing the policies that under which we make our fields and other park amenities available to athletic programs. Creating an inventory of current user agreements and some other related tasks. One thing I think that we will I think the Parks and Rec would like to have council ask them to do, they've already said this at a previous meeting, that we should include is resuming the user meetings that they used to oversee, sort of having, assembling a list of all the current users that they know of, giving that to the office, coordinating a meeting, and sort of having to facilitate that, like an annual process where we have a meeting with all the users of the parks. So I would definitely like to include that on the list. Other suggestions have been to investigate whether there's a way that the borough could bring different kinds of food trucks or outside vendors into the parks for special events, contractual liability issues, and just to sort of do some research in whether there are other townships and boroughs that have programs that we could model something like that after. So those are some of the ideas. Does anybody else have any other items they would like to see suggested this time for the list? All right, well, hearing none, those are the ones that I have to put on the list for now. After we get some feedback from Parks and Recreation, we could take this up next month. For now, I'm going to just say that let's move this to our next meeting. So we'll table any action on this for now and take it up next month. Next up is parks, permits, and fees, park permits and fees. And I've had some discussion with the borough manager prior to the meeting, and I think that there are a lot of complexities to this that I would like to have time to sort of take, for us, everyone, for her to take more of a look at before we start trying to develop a permit form. As much as I know we'd like to get that in place, so I'm going to ask for a motion to table this. Unless somebody wants to discuss it, but I think that there's work that needs to be done. Samantha's nodding her head in agreement.
Okay. So do you need a motion, or would this table?
I don't even know. Let's just bring a motion. So
Okay, I move we table. Let's see. C.
Okay. I don't know if we need to table the committee meetings. I've never been clear on the formality we were
Err on the side of doing it.
It's error on the
It's
side.
your college chair.
Right.
All right, it's tabled. Unless you object to that. All right.
It's all good.
All right, thank you. All right, next item, potential action item for council is the bridge construction inspector selection. So Samantha, would you
Absolutely.
speak to that? Thank you.
So this is an item you all may remember. Council had to pass a resolution 2 or 3 months back establishing the process by which we're going to select the bridge, the inspector for the Narberth Ave Bridge construction project. And the way this works is because it's a federally funded project, we have to have a third-party inspector as part of that, separate from our engineer. And so what council decided in that resolution was to appoint the infrastructure committee as the selection group for the bridge construction inspector. So the first step in doing so is this committee has to approve the advertisement that we would put out through PennDOT's ACMS system to collect bids for the construction inspector. And then once we get those bids back, this body would then select the construction inspector. Most of the language in here is kind of boilerplate sort of stuff from PennDOT. The one thing I will really call your attention to is there are a series of weighted categories that have different percentages on them. That's really the main area that PennDOT would like to see any input from the borough on before this would go out to bid, as if we would want to tweak any of those percentages and how we evaluate the bids that come in. But otherwise, the rest of it I think is kind of pro forma sort of stuff.
So my only question would be, it says past experience in similar construction, and I always think of our bridge as unique, but is there a comparable?
Yeah, there is. I mean,
Okay.
if you look at, even just most recently, the Pennswood Ave Bridge up in Lower Marion.
Okay.
That's one as well that ran over, the railway lines. And,
Okay, so that
yeah,
won't
if you
limit
ride on the R5, and there are plenty of bridges that go over the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Though the bridge is very special and unique to all
Right.
of us in Narberth.
Well,
So Samantha, who is on the group that does this evaluation? It must be a handful of people.
Yeah, it's the infrastructure committee.
Oh, so it's us. It's not but presumably, someone from Pannoni or other people would be part of that process, or not really?
Me and Eric would definitely be available to provide, expertise, just like on any other issue the infrastructure committee tackles. Yeah, it wouldn't just be, here's some bids, pick somebody, good luck. No, me and Eric would certainly be here to help out with that.
We're able to vet, anybody would come in.
But so is it lowest responsible bid, or there's some kind of formula that weights the dollar value plus this evaluation?
Yeah, if you look at those, let's see here, let me pull those percents up for myself here.
It's at the bottom of the page.
Criteria description?
No, I have it in front of me. Okay.
Criteria, selection criteria.
Oh.
Three firms, the purchase negotiated agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just asking how price and these things, what is there, how they,
So there's actually going to be no difference in price. If you look at below those percentages, sorry, now the memory is coming back to me now where PennDOT explained this to me. If you look down at staff classification right below that, PennDOT actually sets out what the pay for the positions are going to be.
Is there a maximum number of hours though? I mean, because those are hourly rates.
the hours matter.
The hours would matter. Yeah. Hourly rates are the same. What about, is there a cap on the hours? I looked it up.
It just says that, like 3 paragraphs above that, the municipality reserves the right to increase or decrease inspection staff on each part. Let's see here. And I think it's one of those things where just with the nature of the project, I don't know if you can necessarily set out what the what the hours are going to be.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the problem is that like it seems to me like they should say how many hours they're going to spend, or there should be a cap, or there should be something, because otherwise we're kind of leaving it sort of open-ended. Unless I'm missing something here.
No, but I think at the end of the day, this is going to be the cost of the inspector is going to be I don't necessarily want to stick my foot in my mouth here, but I think there's a good chance the cost of the inspector is going to be a small percentage of the total cost to construct the bridge.
Of which we're only paying 5%.
Of which the borough is only responsible for 5%. So it almost like, PennDOT is the entity paying, I forget offhand now, 85% of the cost of it. So I'll admit that the cost component, well, it certainly, is important. Again, I think there's a reason PennDOT has this written the way they do. And again, I was basically told that PennDOT only adjusts the percentages, don't really mess with the rest of this.
Well, if I was looking at the percentages, I would have to say 70% the specific experience is really based on experience, prior experience, whether it's similar or sort of overall construction experience. That seems like 70% is sort of one thing. And if I were going to do anything, I would obviously suggest waiting what the team will do to ensure the project is constructed on time more highly than it is waiting. All of these are all important things, including quality control, and quality assurance. Although I feel like quality control and quality assurance is one of those things that the construction inspectors independently has a responsibility for, which is to say, if they don't do that, they're liable, probably, right?
Yeah.
Whereas getting it done on time is something that's just really critical to us because of the length of time this bridge has been closed. So, I mean, unless it would be considered totally inappropriate, I'd be happy to flip that to 30%. Maybe, take the remaining 35%, take the remaining, 50% of experience and split it 25-25 or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'd be happy to be like that to me. 25-25.
No, actually, I'm kind of
15 and 30. Wait, no. Yeah, that's what I did.
No, I have followed along with your idea of present a plan of what are you going to, what is your best ability to present how you can move the
Put a
project
percentage on that encourages, says, if we want to get this, we better put together a really solid plan and look at those deadlines and be prepared to identify where we see possible challenges in this schedule and how we would meet them. So I wouldn't mind tweaking those percentages to reflect that. Anybody else?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing the inspector could do to keep the project moving on is to issue reports on a timely basis, because they can't control how quickly the contractor works, but if they delay an inspection or they delay issuing a report for an inspection, that can slow the whole thing down. So.
Well, that would be maybe something they would explain under what they could do to ensure the project is constructed.
I'm agreeing with you, Michelle.
You do.
I'm agreeing with you.
So anybody want to put some numbers to that? If they think that it would make sense to emphasize that, should we do like 25, 25, 20, and 30, going from top to bottom? 25% specific experience, 25% past experience, construction experience, 20% quality control, 30% timeliness. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm happy to entertain any other
No,
numbers.
definitely we want timeliness. That's what we want.
I'm all in favor of increasing the last one, the 15% to 25 and subtracting from some of the other ones.
So we want to say 30, 25, 20, 30, or I'm sorry, 30, 25, 20, 25 then?
That works for me too.
Perfect.
Right, sounds good, thank you.
Great, so I'll get that back to PennDOT, and then that'll get out to bid, and hopefully we'll see, just with the way the timing of the meetings work and all that, hopefully at our June meeting we'll have bids back to consider.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you again also for just keeping everything moving forward. On the bridge, next you have given us a memo on ongoing borough projects. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at that. Does anybody have questions or do you have any updates?
I'm happy to take any questions, otherwise I don't have anything really specific in terms of updates. I mean, Borough Council did talk about the skate park after their meeting, after this memo was written.
Right.
But I don't know, I guess that would just encourage people to watch the recording of that meeting. I don't know, we've had so many, I've spent a lot of time focused on the skate park, and I don't know, I really prefer not to reiterate what feels like the same thing.
The target date for opening is June 3rd. I see that Public Works is moving the equipment into place according to the layout. That's very exciting to see that actually happen in real space. Is that going reasonably well?
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, so
great.
the one piece is out there and assembled. We
Okay.
have, we should be done assembling by Tuesday, and then we'll patch and be open in time for Friday.
Excellent. Thank you so much for everything. I have one question, I guess I've been meaning to ask, and since you're here, Rob, I'll just ask you. The Haverford Avenue raised pedestrian crosswalks, which really was public health and safety. I mean, it's still on this memo, but I did want to ask what the current sort of thinking is on that.
Well, yeah, I think we're just waiting, and we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment, right?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do and talk with public health and safety about was, as part of the application for the TCDI grant, was incorporating that into the TCDI grant, because my understanding from Eric, and again, if I'm wrong, please let me know, because I've certainly been wrong before, is that in order to put down something like a raised pedestrian crosswalk, you have to have some sort of study to back it up. You can't just, well, for a crosswalk, it might be a little bit less of a threshold, but do a raised pedestrian intersection, you have to have a little bit of a study and a plan before you just do it.
That would be in line with the PennDOT traffic control manual. It's when you start putting traffic devices in, traffic calming type devices, you need to at least have evaluated the impact. So I think that's a combination. There's that. You have the TCDI. There's discussions about the station circle. I think all that kind of stuff just kind of playing out right now, and that should coalesce a little bit more hopefully before you.
And I would say if we aren't awarded the TCDI grant, then the borough can just separately have Pinoni do the required work to comply with the PennDOT regulation and move that forward.
So PennDOT requires, if you were going to,
Well, so-
if you were going to put like a movable, like rubber, mildly raised pedestrian crosswalk, and that would actually require you to study?
Well, so they have,
Well-
when you do traffic calming, they have the guidance, it's PennDOT traffic control manual,
Yeah,
or traffic calming manual.
Actually, hold on one second, if I may. So I think I might have some misunderstanding about what our goals are, because I think the conversation with public health and safety somehow shifted from a temporary sort of thing to a permanent intersection level
We're talking
installation.
about different things, that's why.
Well,
Sorry.
Part of it is the station circle, this Warnock concept of extending
Yeah.
across to that intersection.
Yeah.
So,
I guess the last time we talked about this in this committee, and that was in public health and safety, and so I think clearly, like, I'm misunderstanding. I thought that the idea was to price out sort of movable traffic calming, sort of raised crosswalk type things that could be tried in different places. But
That
that's
was
gone
the
by the
beginning.
wayside.
Yeah, so that was where the conversation started with public health and safety.
mhm.
And then my recollection is it then shifted to, well, if we're talking about doing this, why not just do intersections and do something permanent?
Okay.
And then
All right.
hence, that's how
All
we
right, so
ended
let's see
up.
how the TCDI grant comes
Yeah.
out. If not, maybe we could
Right, we
take
can
that
revisit
conversation.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification, because I wasn't sure of that. Okay. Does anybody else have questions on borough projects? Memo? If not, I think we will likely actually be done by 2. We have one member of the public present. Carol Marie, do you have any public comment? Carol Marie, did you want to make a public comment today?
Sorry, I'm trying. So with the sidewalks, what's the time? Like, if there's some sidewalk that's in really bad shape, is there a way to expedite that to the front of the line rather than wait? And what's the timeline to get the whole borough inspected and safety repairs?
Yeah, so I guess what I would offer on that is that we won't know how long it'll take the whole borough until we've done kind of this first go at it, and then I could better answer that. I would say if something is like particularly bad, if you want to help save, Public Works the time and trouble of having to go and find it, I certainly appreciate that. And, if you want to bring that to the borough's attention. That being said, for borough properties as well, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is before we even inspect the downtown, I want us to inspect borough-owned properties to make sure we're in compliance with our own ordinance before we tell anyone else to do it. So it's going to be borough properties and then downtown properties, and then we kind of report back and go from there. But Carol Marie, if there's a residential property of that is like really bad, please let us know.
Carol Marie, I'm glad you said that. That's interesting, because as we were having our discussion, because I understood we were just rolling this out to 5A first, I kind of held that back, but I had the same thought, which is that when we do get to the point of rolling this out, should we consider a tiered approach where, like, in addition to just saying pass, fail, we've got sort of like pass, really bad, like fail, but only by a little bit, as opposed to fail, like critical condition, and maybe, put those at the top and the front line. But I thought that was like a question for later on down the road, but I actually think I do agree that would be probably a prudent way to
Yeah, I think
use our resources.
Kevin and Jeff are some of the most common sense folks I've met before. I think so.
All right, so I like that idea.
Well, there's one piece of sidewalk, the 200 block of Sabine on the borough side, which we brought to your attention a bunch of times, and it seems to get overlooked. I don't know if it just is too far up that the crew looking at it, but that piece of sidewalk is in crumbles. And
Carol Ray, I'm sorry, I don't know which piece of sidewalk you are talking about. So could you be a little bit more specific?
it's the one across from between 222 and right across from 222 Sabine.
Okay,
Right by the park.
Okay,
Can you send a
there's a lot.
picture?
Yeah, could you send a picture? I mean, there's a lot of sidewalk.
That's
over
the
there.
easiest, that's the clearest way.
Okay, I will send that over again. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Conroy. Any other public comment? Okay, this is great. Motion to adjourn?
Actually, sorry, I do want to say
Oh,
one
sorry.
more thing to Carol Marie. Carol Marie, I do appreciate the other stuff you have brought to our attention, and I'm really happy that Jet and this committee will appreciate this. Carol Marie brought to our attention a sinkhole over on Sabine Avenue as well. And the borough's had a contractor this week out there fixing the sunken, the damaged stormwater pipe out there. So I do want to thank you, Carol Marie, for bringing that one to our attention.
And does everybody know, I mean, I know nobody in the public.
And thank you for fixing that one, because that was in bad shape.
I know nobody watches this, but just in case anybody watches this meeting, don't forget, we have this MyGov you can get to on our website now, and it's sort of like the See-Click-Fix, except not like the Snappy app on your phone, but you report things, and the borough has like you'll see that printout of it in our packets, and you can clearly track, all the stuff that has come in that way, and the way that our public works or administrative staff is addressing those issues. So use MyGov, make an account. Okay. Anyone want to move to adjourn?
Yeah, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, then the meeting is adjourned at 1:54.